Hi everybody, welcome back. Our FreqTrade series is continuing on and I'm enjoying your guys' questions. Today we're gonna dive into the most frequently asked question, and that has been, can we just do a start to finish, get FreqTrade up and running? Now we've pieced together a few things from other series and I've made some assumptions based on what your experience level might be in Docker or in other types of virtualization platforms. So let's just start right off the bat. We're gonna start with a bare operating system. We're gonna install Docker, we're gonna configure it, we're gonna install FreqTrade, we're gonna configure that, we're gonna get it up and running, we're gonna have a GUI, and we're gonna be good to go. And you can start experimenting with your strategy file. So let's get into it. To start out, go ahead and get yourself a Ubuntu or Debian virtual machine up and running, just like you would any other, either a virtual machine or on physical hardware, whatever your preference is, whatever you're most comfortable with. From there, we're gonna take you through everything. So to start, we need to get Docker up and running. And this is the easiest way to do it. Go ahead and head over to get.docker.com. And this is where you're gonna find our installation script. This works against lots of different operating systems. What's nice is it takes care of all the dependencies and sets up their repo so that it's fairly future-proof as well. So this is simple, it's just a 2-line install. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take this curl command, which is gonna pull down the installation script. So let's copy that and head over to our fresh virtual machine, and we're just gonna paste that in. Okay, so that just pulls down this get-docker.sh file. And then we need to execute that, sh get-docker.sh. It's gonna ask for your sudo password, and then it's gonna run in the background. And at the end of it, you'll end up with a nice, fresh, ready to go Docker install. Okay, once that's done, let's go ahead and get Docker Compose installed as well. Sudo apt install docker compose. And let that run through as well. Takes a moment. And then the third step is we need to add our running user to the Docker group. This will allow us to execute Docker commands successfully, make sure all of our local file permissions are correct. Sudo usermod -a -G Docker, and then the name of the user you're logged into. Okay, and at this point, I recommend a quick reboot. Okay, once you get back up and running and logged in, next, we're gonna move on to getting FreqTrade installed. Now this is again going to be a Docker image, so let's get its framework set up. First we need to do is make a directory for its configuration files to live in. Let's make a folder aptly named FreqTrade and change directories into that, cd FreqTrade. And let's pull their baseline Docker Compose file. Now, don't worry too much about trying to capture these specific commands we're running. They're all listed on my website. You can click the link below to get to all that sample code. Click that link below if you need to grab those commands. So we've went ahead and pulled that Docker Compose file. And then in this folder, let's go ahead and do Docker Compose pull. That's gonna go ahead and pull down the FreqTrade images that are specified in that Docker Compose YAML file. Just takes a moment to pull and extract. And once that's done, we're ready to go ahead and start configuring FreqTrade. So our next command, we're gonna run Docker Compose using the run command --rm. That means it's gonna remove the container when it's done, and it's gonna call the FreqTrade container. It's gonna pass the create user dir parameter, and it's gonna give it that directory. So what this is doing is it's telling the FreqTrade Docker image to go ahead and create its own user data folder structure. Okay, just takes a moment. And then similarly, we're going to run another command, and this is going to create the baseline configuration. So this will create just a shell of a config file, and it'll place it in this user data /config.json path. We'll go ahead and run this, and this is gonna ask us some interactive questions. Most of these are just gonna be default. So do we want to enable dry run simulated trades? Absolutely. If you're watching this video, you're definitely new to FreqTrade, you must run in dry mode. Stake currency. We're gonna leave this to default at BTC, Bitcoin. Stake amount, this is 0.01 of a Bitcoin. Max open trades, defaults to 3, that's okay. Desired time frame, 5 minutes, so that's 5-minute candles. And our display currency, so you can set this to your local currency, US dollars or euros, whatever your local currency is. This way it'll calculate those profits and losses in a currency that you recognize. And then we're gonna select our exchange. So I'm gonna choose Binance US, that's their United States offering. We are not gonna use Telegram, so that's off by default. We are going to enable the REST API, so hit yes. And then here is particularly important, we need to take this loopback adapter out, this 127 address, and put in 0.0.0.0. Because this is inside of a container, we are not actually accessing it from the container's perspective of the local host. We are technically outside of its environment, so we need to make sure it's listening. And we're going to do a API username and password. So the username defaults to FreqTrader. Go ahead and leave that if you like, and set a password that makes sense to you. Okay, that's gonna build out your base configuration. Pretty easy, right? Now we have a few more things we need to do. Let's go ahead and edit that configuration because at least for my particular exchange that I chose, Binance US version, we need to pull out a few invalid trade pairs. Otherwise, it's just not gonna start up right. They don't exist on that exchange. They're invalid. So FreqTrade will just immediately stop running. We're gonna edit the user data config.json, and we're gonna go ahead and scroll on down to pair whitelist. And we're gonna remove several of these. I need to get rid of algo, atom, bat, BRD, EOS, IOTA, NEO, NXS, XMR. Those all need to go away. They're just not valid on Binance.us today. Go ahead and save and close that, Control O, Control X. And we need to make one more modification to the Docker Compose file before we start up the container. So let's edit that, nano docker compose. It has the exposed ports commented out, so we need to uncomment this. Keep in mind the indentation's important here. Make sure that these are at the right level. And then secondarily, we need to remove this loopback once again, this 127.0.0.1. Go ahead and pull that out completely. So it should just look like this. We're going to map our external 8080 to the internal, the FreqTrade side 8080, okay? And that is it for this. We'll go ahead and save and close that. Okay, now let's go ahead and start it up. This is what you've been waiting for, right? Docker-compose up-d. So this will go ahead and launch that. Now what you can do is take a quick look at what it's doing. Easiest thing to do is see if the container is running or not running. Docker ps. And we see that we have a running container. It's been up for about 10 seconds. Yeehaw. And we can also take a look at its real-time logs. This is a really handy command to have available. Docker logs -f for follow, and then the name of container. So this is FreqTrade. Enter, and we'll see in real time, this is the output of that container. You can see that from your local machine here. And we can see that the final state, the last line in this log, it shows that it has a bot heartbeat and state equals running. That is great news. So let's get out of those logs, Control C. And now let's go ahead and head over to a browser. And if you point your browser at the IP address of your server that we've been working with and give it port 8080, if you'll recall, that will present you with the FreqTrade UI. Fantastic. Now we just need to log in. So hit the login button in the top right. This will be the username and password that we set earlier. So FreqTrader, and then the password that you set. There we go. Goes back to a similar looking page, but if you look closely in the top right, it says online now. And now if you go to dashboard and trade, you'll see we actually have some information in here. Now it shows our pairs, and we can see if we go to the status tab that it is running. It tells us the FreqTrade version. We're running in dry mode. We're running this sample strategy file, and all of that. Okay, now nothing is happening quite yet. In the background, it's still analyzing that market data to see what is going on and decide when it needs to execute a trade. That is where your strategy file comes into play. That's when it's going to decide when it's time to buy and when it's time to sell, right? So if we select one of these pair lists here, we'll see that real-time market data, and you can see if there's many buy or sell indicators. And we can scroll down here, and if you give it a little bit of time, you'll see some open trades start to appear here. And if you give it a little more time, as those trades continue to close out, you'll see them start to show up in your closed trades. Okay, terrific, you're off and running. That's it, awesome. Well, there's one more thing. We're not quite done yet. Now, if you recall, I had to take a lot of those trade pairs out of my configuration file just so that it would run, because the sample ones in there's only a small subset of those ones that are valid in Binance, and I'm sure that those will change over time as new coins come available and markets change and some coins become more viable than others. Well, what would be a lot better than setting that static whitelist is, what if we set something that's more dynamic, where it's going to look at market data, it's going to look at those coins' performance, several other indicators, and decide what trade pairs to use. That sounds like a lot more valuable than just setting a static pair. Now, you might have a particular strategy where you say, I'm only trading against this particular coin, that's what my strategy is built for, that's what I'm trading against. That's fine. But if you want this to just dynamically decide what coins are best to trade based on how they're performing, well, then let's set that up. That's pretty easy too. So let's go back over to our command line of our server, and we're gonna edit our config file one more time. So that's user data config.json. And let's scroll down once again to our pair list section. And you'll notice in here, we have the method is static pair list, okay? So what that means is it's only looking at the whitelist and the blacklist, and that's what we're trading against, and that's what you get. Well, let's move this to something more dynamic. I'm gonna replace this pair list section. I'm gonna pull that out, and I'm gonna paste in some sample that I've already created earlier. I'm leaving this static pair list commented out with this double / just so you know where it belongs. And we're going to go to a volume pair list. But what this is gonna do is it's gonna say, okay, number of assets, we're gonna evaluate 70. That's a lot of trade pairs, maximum of 70. And we're gonna set a particular refresh period for how often it's gonna go back and reevaluate this. And secondly, we're gonna use an age filter. So this is gonna say, in this case, minimum days listed is 10 days. So that means new trade pairs that come in and get listed on those exchanges, they can be super volatile on their first few days on the market and in ways that don't follow normal market indicators. Those are probably not the best thing to trade against. They're gonna be all over the place, be really difficult for your algorithm to track those. So let's give them about 10 days to settle down, start falling into some normal market rhythms, and then that way we'll pick them up after that. And then our final filter in here, in our example, is just a range stability filter. So this is gonna look back 5 days and say minimum rate of change is 2%. So that means coins that are super stable or flat, for example, Tether coins, we don't necessarily wanna trade against those. They don't have that volatility we're looking for in order to make successful trades and gain profits. So things that are really flat, they're not really gonna do us much good in a algorithmic trading bot. So we'll go ahead and filter those out, anything less than 2%. You can adjust these numbers, decide what works for you. So once we save this and exit out, we can go ahead and go back to our UI, and we can just restart with this gray little reset button here. This is gonna reload the configuration. It'll pick up those changes. And now this is gonna take a little bit longer for it to show that in here, because in the background, it has to now go and evaluate those trade pairs and see which things actually work and evaluate there. So it does take a little longer to start up. And we can also turn on this auto refresh at the top. It can be helpful if you're just monitoring this. And we'll see, now there's not a lot more, but there are different trade pairs in here. These are not defined in our whitelist. So now we have some more stuff to trade against. And those were dynamically added by adding those configuration points in. So guys, I hope this really gets you to where you wanna be. Start to finish, you've got a bare metal operating system, we've got Docker installed, we've got FreqTrade installed, configured, running, you're in the web UI. Awesome, you're off and running. You're ready to start tinkering with your strategy file, seeing what works for you, have some fun. Let me know down in the comments what you think of this, what other types of topics you'd like to see. If you're not already, please subscribe, hit that thumbs up button, it helps me a lot. Hit that notification bell, that'll tell you when the next one comes in. Thanks for watching, I'll see you in the next one.